It's Thursday, September 4th, and Tropical Storm Gabrielle is expected to form. And this invest right out here in the Atlantic is expected to turn into Tropical Storm Gabrielle sometime this week. It has seen a very large uptick in the confidence of formation. We're now up to an 80% chance of seeing some formation with this. And a lot of our models agree that we are going to see Tropical Storm Gabrielle form this week. And then it is also tracked quite a bit further south and west since we last talked about it. So this definitely is going to be the storm to watch. And the current trend is that this could go into the Caribbean potentially. So definitely something that we'd want to look out for. Anything further than that at the moment, it's not really worth predicting, but that is definitely something that we're going to want to keep a very close eye on. Now, currently, this isn't really getting its act together because there's a large plume of Saharan dust out here, and the shear isn't very favorable for development at the moment, but in the long term, as it tracks further west, it's going to likely escape a lot of that dust, get into a much moister environment, and really be able to take full advantage of those warmer sea surface temperatures, as also it gets into a much more favorably sheared environment. So currently, development isn't really being seen, but as it goes further west later this week, we're definitely going to get at least a tropical storm out of Gabrielle. For severe weather risk today, we actually have a big marginal risk of severe weather spanning all the way from the Appalachians up into the northeast. Then we have a pretty widespread threat. I've seen some general thunderstorms stretching all the way back through the central plains, southwest, and even up through the Pacific coast. And there's also this little area down in southern and central Florida. It looks like the main thing today is just going to be that risk of some 60-mile-an-hour damaging winds, albeit that's going to be very conditional, and we might not even see that. But pretty much anywhere in that marginal risk, you could potentially see some severe damaging winds today. Then for our hail risk, it's going to be pretty much zero. We're not going to see any hail large enough to really warrant the SPC outlining a risk area for it. So likely smaller than 1 inch in diameter. And for our tornado risk, it's the same thing. There isn't really much of a tornado risk today, although I do think there is going to be a non-zero potential along our cold front, although it's going to be a pretty small risk, and it is going to be pretty close to zero. And our temperatures up north are going to continue to be very nice and very cool, stretching all the way from the northern plains, northern Midwest, even into parts of the northeast now, and the Great Lakes region. You're going to be seeing a lot of those low 60s, feels like temperatures, potentially even high 50s, and specifically up here in North Dakota, you could be seeing some potential freezing feels like temperatures today. Now, in a lot of Minnesota, even northern Wisconsin and the Michigan Peninsula last night, you saw some freezing feels like temperatures. And as fast as those came, those are likely going to go away, with the only place seeing some really ultra cool weather being up here in North Dakota and the northwestern quarter of Minnesota today. As for the rest of the country, we're going to start to see a warm up from that big cold area that we saw the last couple of weeks. It's going to start to reach back up into those mid 80s and low 90s. Feels like temperatures with our hottest areas down here in eastern Texas, the immediate Gulf Coast, and then Florida. You're likely going to be seeing a lot of mid 90s and even low hundreds feels like temperatures. And also back in the Pacific coast, it's going to be a lot of mid 90s feels like temperatures again. And then good news for our risk of flooding is that we're not going to really see any potential out here in front of our big area of severe weather. It's going to be completely isolated to the southwest and then southern Florida, with the biggest potential being in southern Arizona. We have a slight risk there, potentially seeing 2 to 4 inches of rain, and we have a surrounding marginal risk here surrounding that. And also in southern Florida, those marginal risk would just be for 1 to 2 inches of rainfall. And here's what the radar is going to look like in our main risk area, stretching all the way from the lower Appalachians all the way up through the mid-Atlantic and lower northeast. We're going to see that even starting all the way through last night, the morning hours, and even into the afternoon, we're just going to be seeing that line of thunderstorms along a cold front, then along our pretty big trough digging in, really helping to initiate, organize, and sustain all of these storms. But they're likely not going to reach severe characteristics until at least midday, even if that. We can see that our storms aren't really looking super organized. It's just going to be a very linear mode along our cold front, but I would likely expect some strong gusty winds out of this main line in front of our cold front. And then these storms will likely die off around the late afternoon to evening hours down here. And then moving a bit north to the northeast, I actually think this is where that greatest potential of seeing some severe weather is going to be. This is going to be for a couple of reasons. Of course, we have that cold front and trough up here, but we also have a embedded low pressure system up here as well. We're going to see a lot more storm coverage. So it's not really going to be broken. It's going to be quite a bit more linear and covered in uniform like we're used to seeing. And this is going to kind of be the same story where these storms really start to get their act together around midday, go and stay strong all the way through the afternoon, and then start to die off right after nightfall. Then here's our big weather causer, our jet stream or giant trough digging in up here right over the Great Lakes region. And we can see right in front of our jet, it's going to be our main risk of severe weather today. That is no coincidence. That's going to bring a lot of large scale forcing to this area. Then also it's going to help to organize and sustain our storms. And here's the environment up here in the northeast where it's mostly just going to be for a small risk of seeing some 60-mile-an-hour damaging winds. I also think there's a non-zero chance of seeing a couple of spin-up tornadoes embedded within that line. That's going to be because we have a pretty nice curve in our photograph. And then our shear and helicity parameters aren't going to be bad at all. To see that in our cloud basis will definitely be low enough to support that. Then our 3 cape on top of that even will be quite high. So not only just feeling that general threat of severe weather, but also potentially seeing a couple of spin-up tornadoes. Also, our organizing shears can be quite good nearing that 40-knot threshold for some really organized storms. And then, of course, it's going to be moist stuff out here, 60 dew point, and definitely sufficient cape nearing 2,000 for some severe weather. Now, one thing to know is that our precipitable water isn't super high, and we don't really have that much dry air loft. So those risk of damaging winds are looking pretty low, although I definitely do think we'll see a couple of clusters within our line producing that because it looks like we're going to have some organized severe storms. Then our hail isn't really going to be there, although I wouldn't be surprised to see some 1-inch in diameter hail because we do have some nice mid-level lapse rates, really low freezing layers on top of that. And then moving a bit more south into more the mid-Atlantic and lower Appalachians, it looks like it's going to be pretty much the same environment, just with all of our ingredients dumbed a little bit more down. Specifically for our tornado risk, it's going to be quite a bit lower. We're not really going to have those same shear parameters, but we still will have quite a bit of 3 cape. So that's definitely not a non-zero chance, although it's still looking pretty small, even though our cloud base would be low enough for that. But it's still going to be a moist environment. Definitely enough cape, pretty much the same cape we saw in the northeast, and pretty nice low-level lapse rates as well, and that inverted V profile that we saw and that other sounding. So it just looks favorable for general severe weather. Mostly going to be those 60-mile-an-hour damaging winds, though, down here in the mid-Atlantic and lower Appalachians.